You know what? Everyone asks me how I'm doing, and I always tell them I'm doing great. And only way I could be doing any better is if I had a twin. I mean, I like I said, I've been doing, traveling all over the world for 32 years, teaching, shooting, and everything. And, and I just love being in the gym, and I get a kick out of it when a kid tells me that, that I made an impact on his life, and it makes it all worthwhile.
That's awesome. Dave, I really appreciate you coming on and giving me the time.
Thank you so much for having me, and, I really appreciate it, and good luck in the future.
I appreciate it. All right, so today the news broke that Nick Easton is out for the season with a herniated disc. The first thing you think is, well, we were waiting for something. It couldn't be this smooth. And this is the biggest problem I have with being a Viking fan is you're basically, for me at least, I'm waiting for the day where someone gets injured like this, where something goes wrong, okay? I mean, you just look at the track record. Bradford, Bridgewater. I mean, there's such a handful of injuries that have happened before the season even starts. So this doesn't surprise me in one bit that something like this would go on. I mean, first Remmers is out in practice. I don't think it's a long-term injury. Eflon's out, and now Nick Easton is out for the year out of nowhere. And this isn't an already stacked offensive line. I mean, this is an okay offensive line. This is an offensive line that doesn't have big names, but they played well together last year. But the year before that, I mean, 2016 was a complete disaster when you look at that season. You start off 5-0. I mean, you got to make the playoffs. And if there's one thing that the Vikings and Viking fans have learned is that the offensive line position, I mean, that's the most vital position in football. It's a domino effect in every way. You don't have a good offensive line, you can't protect your $98 million quarterback, $94 million quarterback that you signed. Then you can't open up holes for a young back who's coming off an ACL tear in Dalvin Cook. And then your best receivers in Thielen, Diggs, and Rudolph, those guys can't get any separation because the offensive line isn't giving the quarterback enough time to sit back in the pocket. And it even goes to the defense. Then the defense is forced to stay on more and more and get tired because the offense can't get the ball moved because the offensive line can't block. It's a complete domino effect when your offensive line is a liability. And right now it is. And it's very scary right now. I know it's August. I know it's early August and the games don't start for another month. But you're telling me that 3 of my starters, 2 of them are out right now. 1 of them is done for the season. There is a little weariness now to this season. And it kind of makes you think, I don't want this to be like it was 2 years ago, And maybe this is time for Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer to look at each other and say, maybe we should trade in Anthony Barr. Because if there's one thing that the Vikings have learned, it was you need an offensive line. You need a good offensive line. You can't be cheap in those positions. You just can't. They tried to do it a couple years ago, and it backfired big time. You can't let that happen. So you got to look at your roster. You've got a lot of depth on the defensive side. Maybe it's time to trade Anthony Barr for a big-time offensive lineman. And this is where Richie Incognito should have shut his mouth and not tweeted and said all that BS, because if he doesn't go on Twitter and call Mike Zimmer a liar, maybe Zim's picking up the phone right now and calling him and saying, hey, come into training camp. Let's see what you're doing. Let's see what you're made of. Maybe he doesn't run his mouth. He has an opportunity. Vikings have a dilemma right now. They have a dilemma. They have a month to fix it. But right now, you can't be feeling good about it. You know what happened a few years ago. It is in everybody's back of their mind right now. And this is a team that has stacked up. They got their quarterback. I said last week it wasn't Super Bowl or bust, but maybe it's time to go out and get a big-time offensive lineman, throw money at him. Then it's Super Bowl or bust to me. Because you just can't waste this year. You cannot waste this 2018 season and kiss it goodbye. You can't do that this year. You got 3 years. You got a 3-year window to win. You have a 3-year window. And the offensive line is in shambles right now. And it's not even September yet. Remmers is out. Eflon's out. Nick Easton, I mean, this came out of nowhere. I know he was banged up, but a herniated disc out for the year. I mean, that you just drop a bomb on everybody. I read the tweet this morning, Adam Scheffler. Come on. It's time for the Vikings to sit and say, we need to fix this right now. You have to fix it right now. You can't go into week one not knowing who your starters on the offensive line are. You can't do it, and you can't throw it together. You can't be cheap here. You can't do it. Because if you do, it's going to backfire, just like it did in 2016. You're 5-0, and your offensive line completely collapsed, and that's when the season started to decline. You can't start this year with a depleted offensive line. You just can't do it. You need to go out, and you need to get somebody. You need to either trade somebody on the defense, or you need to sign someone. Maybe when a team makes their final cuts and they maybe have cut someone they didn't want to cut, you got to bring them in. But this is an issue you have to fix now. It's almost like there's a crack in the wall right now. It's a little crack, right? And then Easton gets hurt, and it gets a little bigger, and it gets a little bigger. And the more you wait, and the more you try to fill in, an okay lineman to try to fill up, because like I said, this isn't like a top offensive line in the game. This isn't a Dallas Cowboy offensive line. It's not. It's really an average offensive line. You got a really nice surprise in Pat Eflon. You got some okay pieces in Nick Easton and Mike Remmers. I mean, it's okay. That's what I'm saying. It's not even like really good to start with. So the fact that you lose Nick Easton and you've got your guys on that are injured right now, it's very scary. It is very scary. You can expect Brian O'Neill, a rookie from Pittsburgh, to come in and start week one. He's trying to gain as much weight as he can right now. They say he doesn't weigh enough to play the position. You going to trust him with your $94 million quarterback that's going to take the reins week one? I don't know. Very, very concerning for me. And it really pisses me off, to be completely honest with you, because it's just so typical. It is so typical that something like this would happen. Why wouldn't it happen? It's the Minnesota Vikings. Come on. Something's got to go wrong. That's the way it goes here. Anytime there's some type of expectation going into a season, there's got to be something that happens. It can't be smooth. You can't have all your players you started in training camp, starter-wise, be healthy for week one. It's impossible for the Vikings. Come on. What am I, crazy? Bridgewater has a career-ending injury. And by the way, what I'm hearing out in New York is they're still scared. Teddy said, his knee is not 100%. So that's another thing. He's not even 100% yet. Teddy, career-ending knee injury. Bradford, Dalvin Cook. What's next? What is next? And that is the most frustrating thing about this, because this is a team that can easily be back in the NFC Championship. But there's one thing that can derail this season, and that's injuries. And we're already starting to get a little taste of it. And it's very scary, because you hate to see this type of team not reach their full potential. You don't want to sit at the end of the season and think, man, what if? That's the worst. That is the worst possible feeling. The worst feeling for Saint fans is, oh man, what if we beat the Vikings? We might have that at the end of the year this year. Now let me switch topics here. Let me segue here into Randy Moss. Okay, so Randy Moss, congratulations, Hall of Famer, first ballot, easy, done. I was not too fond of his speech, to be completely honest with you. I thought a lot of it was, and most of them are just so dramatic, the way they talk and their speeches. They're a lot, I inspired, all this kind of stuff. Like I don't, some of the stuff Randy Moss said, like his tribute to Dennis Green, 100% love it. But then some of the stuff where, he's trying to sit and say I was a role model and I put, let's be honest here. Randy Moss wasn't the best of dudes when he was playing. Right now, like, he's really panned out. Like, I give him credit. Like, when he's on TV, it seems like he matured and he's a completely different person, and I appreciate that. But don't sit and tell people that you were a role model in Minnesota, the way you handled yourself. And, there was a couple of instances where I mean, the franchise wasn't happy with what he was doing off the field and some of the antics he was doing on the field. So let's not get crazy. And that's the one thing I have with these speeches. Just keep it real, man. Don't try to be someone you're not, and don't try to say stuff that that's not true. To say you're a role model, I can't agree with that. But other than that, congratulations to Randy Moss, the most electrifying receiver of all time. I mean, from the start he dominated. 1998, his rookie year, the Vikings should have been in the Super Bowl, up 27-17 in the fourth quarter in 1998. But this topic continues to come up, and it is if Randy Moss is the GOAT or not, right? And it's the two, Randy Moss and Jerry Rice, and I bring it to a lot of people, and I like talking about this because I've been at this for 5 years with this argument, and I'm going to continue to say that Randy Moss is the greatest receiver of all time. I 100% agree. You look at the stats, and okay, fine. Jerry Rice has all the numbers in the world, but if that was the case, why isn't Bill Russell the best player? Why isn't he the best of all time? He has how many rings. You know what I'm saying? So I don't think that tells the whole story. Michael Jordan and LeBron James now in the conversation. A lot of people will take Michael Jordan as the best NBA player. Some people will take LeBron. I mean, Bill Russell, I don't even really think it's mentioned. So that's why I don't think stats is the whole thing. So I tried to break this down the best I could. So the first thing I look at with Randy Moss is, okay, well, who's throwing Randy Moss the ball? Okay, so I made some list here of the players that was throwing the ball to Randy Moss. And I don't have all of them, but I wrote down a couple here. So Randall Cunningham, Dante Culpepper, Brad Johnson, Jeff George, Todd Bauman, Gus Frerotte, Kerry Collins, Matt Castle, Alex Smith, and then he had one really, really good quarterback Hall of Famer, just like Rice had two of them the whole time, Tom Brady. And with Tom Brady, he set the all-time single-season receiving record with 23 touchdowns, completely dominated the season. The Patriots should have won that Super Bowl, should have easily went on to win the Super Bowl. But Randy Moss had one of the most, if not the most dominant year a receiver has ever had in a single season. And then I think to myself, man, what if Randy Moss had a Hall of Fame quarter? What if he was with Brady for X amount of years? First of all, he would have played more because Rice obviously played more than Moss, and he definitely would have put up better numbers than Rice. And I am a firm believer of that. So then you look at the other side of it. Jerry Rice has been with Steve Young and Joe Montana, two Hall of Famers. So Randy Moss was with one Hall of Famer for a couple years, and Jerry Rice was with Steve Young and Joe Montana for his whole career. Now people tell me, oh, well, Jerry Rice, he has a ring. Okay, well, Joe Montana, he won 2 rings without Jerry Rice. So how important really was he, right? Jerry Rice was coached by Bill Walsh, right? He made the West Coast offense. That was a pretty stacked team, right? The defense, the offense. And it's funny because whenever I have this conversation and I'm done saying that part of it, they start giving me, well, you know what? Jerry Rice he never complained. He never had mood swings. And people used to get me there. And then I thought, man, if I'm Randy Moss and I'm playing with a different quarterback every single year, you know what? I might be a little pissed off. I might have a little mood swings. You're right. Playing with a different quarterback every single year? Yeah. I mean, I would think he'd get mad. Do you think Jerry Rice would be upset if he had a different quarterback every year and some of them were really bad? I mean, some of them for the Vikings were really bad. Do you think that Jerry Rice would shut his mouth and continue to play? It's so easy for people to tell me that, Jerry Rice was this class act. Yeah, because he won every single year. He had 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks. What was he supposed to complain about? You can make a list for the stuff that Randy Moss could complain about. I'm going to continue to say it. Imagine Randy Moss had Steve Young and Joe Montana as his 2 quarterbacks. What do you think? And this is another thing that I ask people. Do you really think if Randy Moss had Joe Montana and Steve Young, and Jerry Rice had Joe Montana and Steve Young, and just say they played with them separately. Jerry Rice and Moss weren't on the same team, but they got to play with Montana and Young for the same amount of years, right? Who do you think would put up bigger numbers? And I want you to take the team, too. I want you to look at the whole team. I want you to look at the 49ers defense, the offense, the weapons they had, the coach they had. I want you to look at all of that. Are you going to honestly tell me? Honestly, think about this. Don't say it right off. Think about it. Are you going to tell me that Jerry Rice is putting up better numbers than Moss would?